Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Monday, September 15th, and we had a lot of football to talk about. There is a great weekend behind us. 3 games that really define this weekend, and the 3 games that we thought were going to define this weekend going in, all delivered in a big way. We will get to that in the first segment. We'll break down Georgia Tech beating Clemson. We'll break down Georgia going on the road and winning a classic against Tennessee. And then we'll talk about Texas A&M, Notre Dame to finish this thing off. Then we got a number of other things to talk about. LSU gets a comfortable but not all that convincing win over Florida. Miami just rolls over South Florida. Vanderbilt gets a big time win. Ole Miss escapes over Arkansas, and a number of other things. Then we'll kind of wrap things up. We'll talk about Deshaun Foster and Brent Pry being let go from UCLA and Virginia Tech respectively. We'll get into all that in segment 3, and then we'll finish it off. We'll give some week 2 winners. Obviously we are big winners as fans, but a number of other things to talk about in that segment. But let's jump in. We had 3 games going into this weekend that I think we all felt were going to define this weekend. Some people would have said Miami, South Florida, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Miami handled that one pretty comfortably. But we had 3 games that I felt were going to define this weekend. They all delivered, and they didn't just deliver. They were incredible classic games that could totally change what the season is going to be. And we'll start with the noon slate. We'll kind of work our way through the day with those big 3 games. Georgia Tech beats Clemson 24-21. What a start to the day. It was an incredible game. Georgia Tech in complete control, up 13-0 early in this game. They were outgaining Clemson 185-63 early in this game. They were dominating. And then Clemson goes on a long touchdown drive right before half. They get a quick stop in early in the second half, and they find a way to score on a big-time Brian Wesco 73-yard touchdown. It looked like they were in control. It looked like they had kind of taken over this game. Georgia Tech was able to keep Clemson out of the end zone on the first drive of the second half by an incredible play by Omar Daniels on the goal line. And then it was immediately Clemson took over. Brian Wesco has that big touchdown. And you're thinking, this one might get a little bit sketchy. And they had a play on that touchdown drive right before the half. It was 3rd and 22. They were running the ball, kind of just saying, we'll punt it away. We'll kind of collect ourselves at halftime and attack this thing. And Adam Randall goes for, I believe, 25 yards, gets the first down, and then Clemson's able to march down and get a touchdown. That's where it felt like that could be the turning point in this game, and it looked like it was. Early on in the second half, it looked like Clemson was going to be able to take over and kind of do what they needed to do. Tech was able to kind of stick around in this game. Now, they did have a couple of misses. That tight end sneak was weird in a lot of different ways. The execution was not great, and I don't think the call was all that great, especially considering what Haynes King did in this game. But the defense continued to make plays for the Georgia Tech football team. All the props in the world to Blake Gideon, the defensive coordinator over there, because he did an incredible job in this football game, and especially the DBs for Georgia Tech. They flew around that football field. Omar Daniels probably played the best game of his entire life. You had a number of Clayton Powell-Lee played incredible football. Amari Harvey as well. This Georgia Tech team is for real. Now, we'll talk about that here in a second, but can't say enough about what they did on that final play. You have 26 seconds left, and Brent Key calls a timeout. He explained the entire thing, I have to imagine, to what this team was going to do. He was going to say, we're going to hand the ball off, we're going to get 4 yards here, and then we just got to get this thing off. We got to make sure we get everyone off the field. We got to get our kicking team on, and they drill a 55-yarder, the longest of Aidan Birr's career. Ridiculous. Truly insane in a number of different ways from Brent Key, but they pulled it off. It was incredible coaching job down the stretch of this game where it felt like Clemson left a little bit on the table, especially offensively in this football game, and you have a Georgia Tech team that took every single opportunity that was provided to them and even left a couple on the table that kept Clemson in this football game, and that's really what we have to talk about when we talk about Clemson. They've had 2 games this year where LSU played good enough football to beat them. They absolutely deserve to win that football game. Troy kept you around a little bit more than they probably should have. There were a couple of drives where they had to settle for field goals, or they make a massive play where it rolls off someone's back and Ashton Hampton makes a play on the ball and you're going the other direction. This Clemson team has been in multiple games this year where the other team just outright outplayed them pretty much from start to finish, and a couple of mistakes from the other side is why it was a close game. LSU, they probably should have gotten beaten by 14 or 17. A call near the end zone that probably was the wrong call gives you 7 points back, and Brian Kelly probably making a mistake late in that first half gives you 3 points back. So you're in a position, if you're Clemson, you're in a really bad spot. And I really don't know what the fix is on offense. I don't know if you have outright game changers without Antonio Williams on the field. I do think Bryant Wesco is a great player and is going to continue to develop, but he can't be shouldering all of this. TJ Moore has to step up a little bit more. I thought both of them would. That's why, frankly, I had Clemson going undefeated this year. I thought this team was comfortably better than a lot of the ACC teams on their schedule, including Georgia Tech. They got out executed. They got out physical. They got out everything in this game, if I'm being totally honest. And Haynes King, if he is going to play that level of football, Georgia Tech is going 11-1, and they are getting into the CFP because that guy throwing for 211 yards in this game was the difference maker. He's going to be able to run the football. He ran the football, I think, 25 times in this football game, which is outright crazy, but he's going to be able to run the football. That's what he does. That's what he's comfortable with. If he throws for over 200 yards, if he throws that efficiently without putting the ball in danger, without throwing an interception, they're going to win a lot of football games because Brent Key is going to have them prepare. They're not going to make a lot of mistakes, especially if Haynes King is not making them, and you're going to put them in position to maybe run the table up until that Georgia game, and then they might be in one way or another. Even if they lose that Georgia game and lose in the ACC title, this could very well be a team that's standing in the CFP at the end of it all. Obviously, a lot of work to be done, but they set themselves up incredibly, incredibly well. They don't get Miami. They don't get Florida State. They don't get Louisville. They don't get SMU. They can do some special things this upcoming throughout the rest of the season. We will have to figure out how it develops. Obviously, Georgia Tech's been one of those teams that plays up to this elite talent and then finds a way to fade just a little bit in one moment throughout the season that totally changes things. But they're now 7-1 against ranked ACC opponents under Brent Key. Insane. Ridiculous. It's absolutely incredible stuff what Brent Key has done over there, and he's going to get plenty of calls this offseason. He played at Georgia Tech. He loves Georgia Tech. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. Now, the right job calls, things can change in a hurry. I can promise you that. But at the end of the day, I think this guy wants to build something there, and I think he's fully on his way to doing that. We'll have to see how the rest of the season plays out, but special stuff happening in there, Atlanta. As for Clemson, just want to say one thing really quickly here. There are very clearly things that this team needed in the portal that they did not go get. Whether it's a running back to help out Adam Randall where he doesn't have to be the number one guy just having played wide receiver a couple of years ago. Where you have players on the back end that are very talented players. Probably needed a couple more of those guys. Probably needed a couple of more experienced guys. You had R.J. Mickens last year. Probably needed someone like that in that back end this year. You don't have it. And you're in a position where now you'll be a good team this year. I think you'll probably win 8, maybe 9 games, but you're not CFP good. And I don't see you being CFP good until you change the way that you go about business. So this was what Clemson is. I don't think this was a uniquely surprising result as much as people will tell you that. This Clemson team is not as good as the Georgia Tech team, as plain as day. So we'll see what happens the rest of the way. Point is, they got to change a lot of things up there, and frankly, I don't know if Dabo Swinney is going to be willing to do that. Obviously, plenty of time to figure that out. Obviously, his legacy is in no way tarnished by this, but he's got to figure some things out if he wants Clemson to stay remotely close to the top. Moving on to the 3:30 slate, the game of the day, maybe the game of the year, as far as I'm concerned thus far, or definitely thus far, but maybe throughout the entirety of the year. But Georgia goes on the road to Tennessee, wins a game in overtime 44-41. That was special in a number of different ways. That was not what I expected to get from Tennessee, not what I expected to get from Georgia in a lot of ways, not what I expected to get from this game, but it was incredible. Joey Aguilar was the story of this game coming in. And through one quarter, he looked about as good as any quarterback, maybe not named Jalen Milroe, has looked through one quarter against a Kirby Smart football team. 14 for 14, 213 through the air, 2 scores. He was rolling, and everything was working for him. He did get a little bit of, I don't want to say a bailout. He underthrew the touchdown pass just by a little bit, but Chris Brazzell able to make an incredible play, probably played the game of his life on Saturday. 2 incredible catches that made great big plays for Tennessee, and the one that gave them the lead back was very interesting. It looked like Georgia was in full control of this football game. I think it scored 27 unanswered, if I'm not mistaken. And then Tennessee hits a big one. And you're thinking, what's going to happen as Tennessee kind of finally found it. But after that 14 for 14 start for Joey Aguilar, he went 10 for 22, 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 INTs. That's why they won this game. Georgia, that is. Kirby Smart and his coaching staff made the adjustments that, I don't want to say Josh Heupel because it was mainly the defensive side of the ball, but Tennessee didn't make them. Tim Banks continued to play man coverage against guys like Zachariah Branch, against guys like Kobe Young. It didn't work. They got beat start to finish. London Humphreys beat him on the very last play, again in man coverage. It was bad. And it was a number of different things for the Tennessee side and the Georgia side that did not go well in this game, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. So it's not to say Kirby Smart and company called an incredible game. They made the adjustments that Tennessee didn't, is the way to put that in a lot of ways. And Gunnar Stockton, it was maybe perfect. When you consider going on the road to Neyland Stadium in your first road start, playing a top 15 team, probably playing a top 12 or so defense. Obviously didn't show that on Saturday, but they have the top end ability, lost a couple of players that absolutely will up this team's ability later in the year, but go for 23 for 31, 304 yards passing, 2 passing touchdowns, and 38 yards and a score on the ground. He did everything. He did absolutely everything you could possibly want for Gunnar Stockton to do in that situation with this team, with that team on the other sideline. It was a credible performance from that kid, and it's one of those that I think a lot of people didn't really give him the respect that he probably deserved in a lot of respects, and I understand why, because you lose Carson Beck. Carson Beck looks incredible at Miami right now, and the offense for Georgia has looked pedestrian before Saturday. They found a way to put it all together, and that's something that Kirby Smart just finds a way to do in all of these big games. He has his coordinators play incredible play calling games, and Mike Bobo, one of the best play calling performances I've ever seen him or just about anyone make. He did an incredible job in this football game. The Georgia skill players, not only special, they're really deep this year. They have a number of guys they can go to. Nate Frazier obviously is going to lead the run game. He is the star of that football team. But Chauncey Bowens, Dwight Phillips, Josh McCray got 2 touchdowns, including the game winner in this one. It's a special running back group that is really deep and still has a couple of guys to get back. And then at wide receiver, you have Colby Young, you have Zachariah Branch, you have London Humphreys. Noah Thomas didn't even catch a pass in this game, but he is going to be a factor later on in the season. Georgia did everything this offseason to say, we know we're not going to have the quarterback from a pure talent perspective, not saying anything between Gunnar Stockton and Carson Beck, but from a pure talent perspective, you were taking a step down. That's why you go get all these guys. That's why you add so much around this guy, and an offensive line that for much of the day really did struggle, did not necessarily play their best football, especially on the right side of the offensive line. You lose, I'm blanking on the name right now, you lose your right tackle, apologies, but you lose your right tackle, then you have to move Michael Unai in there, then you have to move Bo Hewley in there later in the game. They were playing musical chairs on that offensive line, and they made it work. And Gunnar Stockton got hit a lot of times and still made some big-time passes. Everything about this team is in order. Everything about this team is where you want it to be. Now, the defense is going to have to take steps, but if you told me early in the season that the thing Georgia was going to have to fix is the Kirby Smart defense, I'd feel okay about them finding a way to get to the CFP and be a full national championship contender, because I think he's going to figure it out. I have to imagine that Kirby Smart has a good plan for how to figure this thing out and get on the right track defensively. I'm not going to worry about that side of the ball with Kirby Smart in charge. So Georgia's in a great spot. They got to bye this week, and then they have their mental hurdle. The same way Tennessee has Georgia as a mental hurdle right now, Alabama comes to town in a couple of weekends for Georgia, and they got to be much better, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Alabama's going to play a really good defense. They're also going to play different defense than Tennessee did in a lot of ways. So it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in that football game. For Tennessee, this is a playoff team. They did an incredible job in this football game. I think when you get back Jermod McCoy, when you get back Ricky Gibson, when you get back some of the players, David Sanders finally comes back, you are going to be okay. You're going to be in a position to win a lot of football games and continue on your way. You have one of the more favorable SEC schedules in the entire league. You have a layup against UAB next week. Then you go to Starkville for a game that could get a little bit sketchy. We've seen what Starkville has been able to do to people this year, but still firmly in the SEC race, still firmly in the CFP race. As far as I'm concerned, we watch 2 playoff teams play. We'll see how that develops, obviously. A lot to be said about the SEC, and we'll talk about that plenty throughout this show, but this is a very good Tennessee football team. You just ran into a guy that was a little bit more prepared. Now, the kick, obviously, you got yourself in a good position. I think there is an argument to be made that maybe Josh Heupel should have been a little bit more aggressive, but you're sitting at a 38-yarder before the false start. I really don't think it's that terrible. I think he did plenty in this game. I think Tennessee did plenty in this game to win. Georgia just ended up taking it at the very end. Texas A&M wins a game on the road against a top 10 opponent, not something they have been very accustomed to over there in College Station, but this one was special in a number of different ways, and it was a game where a lot of things got a little bit toppled over, I guess is the best way to put it, because This is a game that A&M loses 10 times out of 10 in the number of years prior. It was a number of years where, in all of these moments where they have the opening, they have the moment to step into the sunlight and be Texas A&M, be the team that they have all the capability in the world of being, they fall just short. Whether it was Texas last year in the SEC championship or a number of big games over the last couple of years, you beat Alabama a couple of years ago, but you kind of don't make the most out of that season. There's a number of things that A&M hasn't been able to do that they were able to do on Saturday. Mainly, they were able to play an offense where you threw the ball around a lot. And it was an offense that I did not expect to see from A&M this year. I expected them to be explosive. When you have guys like Mario Craver and Kevin Concepcion, you're going to be able to do a lot of that stuff. Those are special athletes that they went and got through the portal that I'm sure Dabo Swinney looking at it right now and saying, maybe you can fix some things throughout the portal. But at the end of the day, you got two special athletes on the outside. I thought this was going to be a run-first football team, and it still very much is, but they have the ability to make you hurt in every sense of the word down the field, and I think they're going to be able to do that just about every defense they play. Now, the Notre Dame defense has a lot of things to figure out. I don't know what's going on over there, but Leonard Moore is just about the only DB that's playing high-level football right now, and you're in a position where your pass rush has to be a whole lot better than it is right now. Obviously, Marcel Reed's a nightmare to get on the ground, but you got to find a way to do it. And you got to find a way to get guys like Boubacar Traore and get your linebacker core with Drake Bowen and all those guys, get them going in a big-time way. They haven't been able to do that early on in this year. Miami put together a great performance. A&M, the exact same thing. And the final drive was absolutely perfect. Now, the final play was a little bit far from perfect. Looked a little bit broken early in that one. Maybe you got the benefit, definitely got the benefit of a missed call late in that game. But at the end of the day, makes a great play to, I'm going to try this, board catcher. A very, very interesting name. But at the end of the day, very, very good catch by that tight end with 13 seconds left. A special win for Mike Elko and company. One that they've been waiting for a very long time. And now you look forward with everything on the table. Firmly in the mix for the CFP. Firmly back in the mix for the SEC. Obviously a lot of work to do. Very, very tough games coming forward. You still have at LSU. You have Auburn coming up after the bye. They're coming off an Oklahoma game. You got at Missouri. You got at Texas. There are going to be tough games, but all the games that I just read, very winnable for this football team. There's no doubt about that. They can do a lot of really special things this year, especially if they get that output from their receivers. For Notre Dame, I just want to talk about the QB holder. What are we doing? Now, I'm not going to attack Tyler Buchner. He has gotten plenty. His college career has been one of the weirdest in the transfer portal era that I have ever seen. At the end of the day, it's not entirely his fault. Why are we giving that to a quarterback right now? He's got so much stuff to do in practice. He's got so much stuff to do on game day. Why are we giving him something that he does not need to handle? The punter can handle it. He's going to be really good at it in a lot of cases because he's got a lot of time to practice it. I don't really understand why we do this. Even Georgia does it with Gunnar Stockton. I don't get it. I don't know why they've done it. They've always done it under Kirby Smart. Very weird. But at the end of the day, I get trying to disguise things on a possible trick play. I don't think it's worth it, if I'm being totally honest, especially when you lose a game the way they lost this one. Tough finish in a number of different ways for a Notre Dame team that probably feels like they could be 2-0 right now. You're 0-2 and you're staring down a college football playoff uncertainty, I suppose. I think if you get 10-2, especially where you're ranked right now, which probably shouldn't be ranked, we'll talk about that later. At the end of the day, you're still in a position to beat Arkansas, to beat USC, to beat Pitt, and maybe get into the field. I do think it's up for debate. I do think it totally depends on what happens around them, and I don't think they're firmly in the mix. Now, they're Notre Dame, so I think we can make the argument that they're probably in pretty good shape in the grand scheme of things, but I don't think it should be enough. I think a lot of people would agree with me. We will see how this unfolds. Tend to believe they won't go 10-2 the way they're playing right now anyway, but at the end of the day, if they do, I know we're going to have a lot of people yelling. I don't know who's going to win out, but we'll see what happens there. A number of incredible things in this football game. Obviously, the holding was less than ideal, but you got the ball to Jeremiah Love a lot. 23 carries, 94 yards. Now, it's pretty good output for a Texas A&M defense that wasn't great against the run coming into this game. Didn't do a great job necessarily overall, but holding him to 94 yards on 23 carries is more than fine. Now, he had 4 catches for 53 yards and a score as well, so he's special. There's no two ways about that, but putting any type of cap on this guy is a win. I think keeping him under 100 yards on 23 carries is a win for A&M. So they move forward. Can't say enough about this football team. A lot of work to do, obviously, and they understand that as well as anyone. They started last year incredibly well. didn't necessarily go their direction. So a lot of work to be done for A&M, but an incredible win that they've been waiting for a long time around College Station to get. But these games were special. You had a game at noon that absolutely delivered in every sense of the word. You had a game at 3:30 that might end up being the game of the year when it's all said and done. And you had a game at night that really almost made all those other two games kind of forgotten about by the end of the night because you were so focused on what was happening in South Bend. It was special in a number of different ways, and it didn't stop there. We have a number of games to talk about. We'll talk about LSU getting a comfortable enough win at Miami, dominating South Florida, Vanderbilt dominating a Lenore Sellers-less South Carolina, and we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about the big games from the weekend. Georgia Tech gets a big-time win over Clemson. Georgia just outlasts Tennessee in Knoxville, and Texas A&M gets the win they've been waiting for quite some time over Notre Dame, 41-40. But we got more games. We got a number of games that we didn't get a chance to talk about in that first segment that we got to talk about right now, and we'll start over there in Baton Rouge. LSU gets a big-time win, 20-10 over Florida. This LSU team gets the win. They picked off DJ Lagway 5 times in this football game. I don't know what's happening with DJ Lagway. I really can't describe it. And now, I got some problems with the way this offense ran. He was not throwing the ball well, and you had him throw it 49 times. I don't understand it. I don't know why Jaden Ball is not the absolute cornerstone of your offense. He's the best football player you have, maybe on the entire team, sans maybe Caleb Banks. You have elite running backs. Hand them the football and get out of the way, especially when your quarterback is playing this poorly. DJ Lagway has to be better. Point blank period. I don't know if it's much going to matter for Billy Napier here pretty soon, but at the end of the day, LSU finds a way to win football games. And the reporter that asked the question got plenty of guff from Brian Kelly. It wasn't pretty. The offense does have a long way to go. They have a number of things to figure out. There's no doubt about that. Winning football games is a big deal. And I think there's a number of things that happened the past 2 seasons that can make that argument very, very clear for us. There's a lot of teams that just don't win, that don't find a way to handle the games that they have to handle. This is a good Florida defense. This is a defense that absolutely can make you pay if you make a number of mistakes. LSU didn't make a number of mistakes. They made a couple, no doubt about that, but they found a way to win this game by 10 points at home at night. You take it and you run with it. It was far from perfect. You got some things to figure out offensively, but that's a win that you feel very confident about moving forward. They're in really good shape. They got Southeast Louisiana next week at Ole Miss, then a bye, then South Carolina. They find a way to go 3-0 in those games. They're in great shape, and they're probably in the CFP before the back half of their season, but then you got Vandy, A&M, Bama, and Oklahoma to end it off. It is not going to be easy. Job is far from finished, but this looks like a defense that is going to keep you in a lot of football games. It looks like a team that is going to be firmly in the mix for an SEC and a CFP run towards the end of the season. And then for Florida, I don't want to waste too much time here. I think they're going to get boat raced by Miami, and Billy Napier is going to be fired next week. I hate to say it. I think Billy Napier is actually a good football coach. I think he will land on his feet. I think he will be more than fine, but this one got away from him, and he hasn't found a way to kind of reel it back in. I don't think they're going to wait until the Texas game. I think they're going to use the bye week. I think they're going to get someone new in there. Maybe they beat Miami and everything changes, but the way Miami's looking right now, I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. Speaking of Miami, Miami wins a comfortable game 49-12 over South Florida. They look the part. About anyone in the country, this team looks the part. There's no doubt about that. A long rain delay in the middle of this game didn't change that Miami dominated from start to finish. Carson Beck did have 2 INTs in this game, but only gave up 12 points to USF, so I think you feel more than fine with that. Carson Beck had 344 touchdowns. He's a very, very good football player, and he's a guy that if you put him in winning positions consistently, he is going to make plays. The one thing I've noticed from him is he's using his legs a lot more this season. Now, not excessively, not a ton, not necessarily a Marcel Reed back there by any means. He's absolutely a guy that can now pull the ball, and that was something that Georgia had a big-time struggle with last year, and it really hurt their run game. He's being able to pull the ball, and I think that's probably something that Miami tried to focus on to help out their run game, and it's really doing the trick. I think this team is going to be really, really awesome. Now, The season will be decided over the next 5 weeks. As far as I'm concerned, they have 2 byes during that time. So it's only 3 games. You have Florida this upcoming weekend. You got to feel pretty confident about that. Then you get a bye, then you go to Tallahassee, which could end up being an ACC title play-in game, especially with the Georgia Tech win and a Cal win we'll talk about here in a minute. But at the end of the day, then you got Louisville on a Friday night after another bye. So you go 3-0 in those football games, you might be undefeated at the end of the season and one of the top, maybe the top seed going into the CFP. This team has everything on the table. They have everything rolling for them right now. I think they are going to be firmly in the mix deep into the season. Then for South Florida, they're going to be fine. Now, you probably need to run the table, but you probably had to do that one way or the other. And then you probably got to beat Tulane in the American title. Plenty of time to be figured out. A lot of good teams in the American. So we'll figure that out as time goes on. But seems like those two are on a little bit of a collision course. We'll talk about that in time. They still have at North Texas, a tough team up there. You also have at Memphis. So plenty of work to be done over at South Florida, but team still looks like the CFP favorite as far as I'm concerned. Vanderbilt gets a big-time win, 31-7 over South Carolina. Lenore Sellers left this game. Now, that should always be said to start this game. Now, Vanderbilt was rolling pretty early in this game, so I'm not necessarily saying that it would have been a totally different result if Lenore Sellers was in. I can promise it would have been a little bit different. Now, will South Carolina win? We'll figure that. We'll see what happens with South Carolina moving forward, but Diego Pavia continues to make big-time plays. He continues to be the absolute heartbeat of this football team. Cedric Alexander is special, and he's a guy that should be talked about much, much more. He's a guy that's probably one of the more underrated running backs and skill players in the entire country. He deserves all the respect in the world, and the Vandy defense really looks special right now. Now, there will be tougher challenges than Luke Doty throughout the football season, but really good football team. They move forward, and they should be good the next 2 weeks, I believe, against relative layups. And then they got at Bama, LSU, Missouri, Texas, Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee. It is not going to be easy. They got a lot of games in there that they could absolutely lose. They have a number of games that it probably won't go all that pretty for them. The reality is a very tough football team that can beat Alabama. As we showed last year, they can beat LSU. They can beat a team like Texas. And then we'll see what happens at the end of the season. Obviously, plenty of work to be done. If I was to make a bet, I'd probably not pick them in the CFP, but you never know what can happen with Diego Pavia under center. For South Carolina, if Lenore Sellers isn't healthy, this season's a wash, if I'm being totally honest. I haven't gotten any update there. We'll see how that develops throughout the next couple of weeks. The reality is they go to Missouri next week. They need him there. And then they have LSU, Bama, Ole Miss, A&M. I think it's going to be a disappointing season for South Carolina, especially if Lenore Sellers is down, even if he's not. I don't know if this offense has enough firepower consistently to keep up with a lot of the teams in the SEC. Ole Miss gets a 41-35 win over Arkansas. They escaped just a little bit in this football game, and it was a very weird football game, really from prior to the football game started. Trinidad Chambliss started this game. The quarterback that came over from Ferris State, the D2 school, was an elite player there, and he looks the part early. There's no doubt about that. Austin Simmons was quietly injured all week, was not on any of the injured reports. I made a pick, assuming that Austin Simmons was going to play this football game. Probably would have made the same pick if I knew, but at the end of the day, Chambliss goes for 3 scores, 2 on the ground, over 400 yards. Special player. I think we have a quarterback controversy in Oxford. We'll see how that develops. I think they wanted to lean to Austin Simmons because he is the future. He is the guy that's going to be on your team in 2026 and maybe 2027, so plenty of things to happen. We'll see how that kind of develops, but Austin Simmons didn't look healthy when he came into this game for the one play I believe he did. And then Trinidad Chambliss, he brings your offense just that little bit different of a look, especially with that run game that Jackson Dart gave you just a little bit as well. So we'll see how that develops. It's a very interesting thing to watch. I assume that Trinidad Chambliss will play this upcoming weekend against Tulane. Tough Tulane team. We'll talk about here in a second as well. But then you got LSU right after that. If they go 2-0 there, they're probably on their way to the CFP. Now, they still got some tough games after that, but they're in pretty good shape if they find a way to win these next 2 games against Tulane and LSU. Then you have Arkansas at Memphis next week. Not an easy game by any means. Notre Dame at Tennessee A&M. It's not going to get pretty. LSU, Texas, Missouri later. It's going to be rough. I can just be totally honest here. I think Taylor Green is going to be able to win you a couple of games just off pure athleticism, pure ability. But I don't think it's going to be a whole lot of them. I think it's going to be a tough season, and I hate to say it, I don't think we're going to have Sam Pittman around there in 2026. I'd love to have him around there. He's one of my favorite coaches in the country, but I just don't see it happening. Alabama gets a 38-14 win over Wisconsin. They did what they needed to do. There's no doubt about that. They executed at a very high level. They're fighting for every snap. Ryan Williams is back to playing elite football the way that he should be. Jeremy Bernard continues to be maybe the best player on that football team. And Ty Simpson had 5 incompletions, 4 touchdowns. The run game is a problem, and that's something that you're going to have to figure out before you get to UGA, because you don't have a run game against UGA, you're not going to score points, plain and simple. So you got to figure out a way to get that going. Maybe it's Jam Miller just coming back is enough. We'll figure that out. Huge shout out to Bray Hubbard in this football game, and really the last 2 football games. He got ripped apart after the FSU loss, rightfully so in some respects, and I think he would tell you that in a lot of ways. But he came back so strong. He's playing elite football right now. He's flying around the football field, had 2 INTs in this game, laid out a number of people the way he does. That's a special football player, and that's a guy that really works his butt off to be as good as he possibly can for Alabama every Saturday. He wasn't very good against Florida State. I think he understands that. I think he took it as fuel, and he's done an incredible job. Huge shout out to him. Huge shout out to the Alabama defense overall. LT Overton's making big-time plays. That team is finally looking like the Alabama we expected coming into the season. They get Georgia after the bye. They win that one, everything is back on the table for a team that we thought might have been dead after week 1. They have Vandy, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, Oklahoma. It is not going to be easy. They have a number of games that they absolutely could lose. I'm still teetering on whether or not they're a CFP team right now. They have a number of things to figure out. They still look like the football team that I think a lot of us expected them to be. For Wisconsin, you do get Maryland next week, so you have the ability to maybe win a Big Ten game, but then it's Michigan, it's Ohio State, it's Oregon throughout the rest of the year. Again, I think you could have a different coach up there in Madison by the end of the year, and that really stinks because I think Luke Fickell's a great coach that might have just played this thing a little bit wrong from the get-go. So very, very interesting situation up there for Alabama. You're starting to look like Alabama again. You got to put on a statement performance in 2 weeks, but as of right now, Bama looks like Bama. West Virginia wins the backyard brawl in overtime over Pitt 31-24. Nico Miracle wins a very weird quarterback situation up there in West Virginia and is able to win this one. Ty Edwards was the show, though. He had 25 carries, 141 yards, 3 touchdowns. Special player in the right offense for his abilities. There's no doubt about that. For Pitt, you needed this one, if I'm being totally honest. You still have Louisville, Florida State, Notre Dame, Georgia Tech, and Miami. You didn't have the ability to lose this one and find your way into the CFP. I think you're in a relatively bad spot. Now, if you run the table in the ACC and win the conference, very different conversation, but I can't imagine that being the case, especially after this performance. That offense just looks a little bit out of sync as of right now. You got to beat Louisville in 2 weeks. If you don't find a way to do that, you're in really bad shape moving forward. West Virginia is a really weird team. There's no doubt about that. They lose to Ohio last week. They find a way to beat Pitt this week. They go to Kansas this weekend. If they start 1-0 in conference play, who knows? Then you got Utah coming to Morgantown, and they're coming off a game against Texas Tech that is going to be very, very intense. Who knows what happens for Rich Rod in year 1? It was a very, very poor start. Maybe it's a strong finish. I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, but you never know with Rich Rod in West Virginia. Tulane gets a big-time win, 34-27 over Duke, their second Power 4 win of the year. They absolutely rolled Northwestern in week 1, but they got Ole Miss next week. They have the ability to find a way to win that game. Then you're above South Florida when you talk about the Group of 6 CFP race. Now, going to be really, really tough, and we'll talk about that game later in the week, but Jake Retzlaff's legs continue to be the difference maker for this football team. It continues to be the thing that is making this team really special. Had 111 yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. This kid's different in a lot of different ways, and he brings something to this football team that they didn't have last year, and I don't think they were going to have this year before he came in, at least not to this level. They're in really, really great shape. If you find a way to compete with Ole Miss, which I think is on the table, I think they have a number of different things that are a little bit sketchy up there. You know, Trinidad Chambliss came into that football game. I don't think Arkansas knew he was going to play in that football game. Tulane will know one way or the other. So we'll have to figure out what that looks like, and maybe they can slow down the Ole Miss offense just a little bit more. But point being, I think we're setting up for a Group of 6 kind of showdown at the end of this season. Obviously, Tulane and South Florida have a lot of work to do before we get there. North Texas has plenty to say about the American coming forward. But at the end of the day, if we get those two teams playing for a spot in the CFP and the American Championship, that'd be pretty darn special. These are two very, very good football teams, and I think they're in really good shape. For Duke, you have an advantageous ACC schedule, so you're not necessarily out of it. If you're getting ripped by Jake Retzlaff, I can't imagine what Haynes King is going to do to you. So I wouldn't feel all that confident about Duke as of right now. I think they have the quarterback to do some really fun things. I don't think they have the quarterback to go win the ACC and find a way to get a win. So I think they can get to 8 wins. I think they have a confident year, but probably not the year you had in mind, bringing in Darius Mensah for the amount you brought him in for. And then finally, let's talk about Arch Manning here for a second. He's playing really bad football. There's no two ways about that. He hit his first four of his first 5 passes, and then he misses 10 of his next 11 throws. One of the worst picks you will ever see, and he had a guy open for the first down on a 3rd down. The mechanics are bad. It's not the same player that it was a year ago. I tweeted this out yesterday. The mechanics early on last year were perfect in every sense of the word. The base was absolutely perfect. He was slinging the ball the exact way he wanted. The arm slot was totally different than it is right now. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's a physical thing. Sarkisian has totally denied that, and I tend to believe him in that respect. I don't know if it's a mental thing. Sarkisian thinks it's that, and I tend to agree with him. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the hype and all of the energy and all the stuff that's been put on this kid has gotten to him. I don't know if it's I don't want to say the word, but there's a reality here that something is wrong. I don't know what it is, but that is not the football player we saw last year. And it's not even from a, maybe we overrated him perspective. Maybe we put too much on him. Maybe he's not the football player that we all thought. That could all be the case. There's no doubt about that. He's a different player mechanically. He's a different player in the way that he goes about business, and it's just not remotely the same. And I don't think that's something that totally breaks down in one offseason. Now, it is something that can come and go, so that's something he's got to figure out. The way that Texas is playing right now, they're going to win 8 or 9 games at most. This offense is not playing good enough football now. The defense is going to keep you in a lot of games, which gives them time to kind of figure things out. Maybe you can go down to Florida in 2 or 3 weeks and find a way to win that football game just based off defense. It can't be the entire season. You're going to lose Red River if you play this level of football. You're going to lose to A&M. You're going to lose to Georgia, and you're staring down an 8-4 season when you came in thinking national title. So a lot of things to figure out for Texas. The good football is in there. That's the one thing I do want to say here. He played way too good of football through 2.5 games last year for that not to be at least part of his game. Now, it absolutely cannot be as big of a part as it was made out to be last year, but he was playing free last year. He was playing confident, knowing that Quinn was going to come back in, knowing that Quinn was going to be the quarterback. He's got to get over whatever the mental block is. He's got to get over whatever is happening to him, because that's not the football player we saw last year. And frankly, I think that football player is still firmly in there. I just think he has to, in some ways, get out of his own way. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously going to be a talking point. Obviously he's going to get buried in praise way more than most other players get buried in praise, but he's a very good football player. He's not playing very good football right now. So he's got a lot of things to figure out. If he doesn't, Texas is going to have a disappointing season, and some weird conversations in the offseason could happen. So a lot of stuff that happened this weekend. A lot of quarterbacks that did not play their best football, namely DJ Lagway and Arch Manning, but we'll talk about it all at the very end of the show with winners and losers. We got a couple other things to talk about. We will get into our final word right after this. We'll talk about Ohio State struggling just a little bit. Iowa State maybe sneaking out with a not deserving win over Arkansas State, and 2 coaches that got fired yesterday that we'll talk about right after this, so stick with us. Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a number of things. LSU gets a comfortable but not great win over Florida. Miami rolls South Florida. Arch Manning doesn't look the part right now, and I don't know what to make of it. There is a good football player in there. He is not coming out lately, so a lot of things to figure out over there in Austin. But we got some number of things to talk about right now. We got a couple of games that happened all the way back on Friday that I want to get into. A couple of teams that struggled a little bit more than I was expecting, and a couple of coach firings, unfortunately, that we have to talk about here. But let's go ahead and jump into this, and we'll start with the game that happened all the way back on Friday night. Houston gets a comfortable win over Colorado 36-20. Willie Fritz is that guy. He has every ability to make this Houston team downright special. Maybe it won't be this year. Maybe they won't be able to put it all the way together with the talent level that they have. Going forward, this is going to be a football team you're going to have to worry about. I can absolutely promise you that. Did great things in the portal, bringing in Connor Wegman, bringing in Tanner Koziel, bringing in Dean Connors. These are very, very good football players that fit exactly what Willie Fritz wants to do with this football team. They dominated Colorado from start to finish, especially on the ground. Connor Wegman dominated them with his legs. Not something I expected to say, if I'm being totally honest, but Ryan Staub did struggle in his very first start. 2 INTs in this football game. The Colorado run game is just not good. It's not nearly good enough to help any quarterback really succeed at a very high level. They have to find a way to get it a little bit better. If you have to get weird, if you have to run end rounds, use guys like a Jerlon Miller and a Marion Miller to get on the outside, you might just have to do it. It is a very, very weird situation, especially with those quarterbacks. If it was my decision, I'd go with Julian Lewis. You're 1-2 right now. You're probably not in a great position going into the Big 12 play, especially 0-1 in the conference already. I'd stick with the kid and try to build a future. I don't know what the situation is around there. I don't know what's going to happen going forward, but I'd go with the one that the fan base can look at and say, maybe it's not perfect right now. It very well could be going forward. But Houston, 1-0 in the conference. They go into Oregon State after a bye week this weekend, and then a huge one against Texas Tech. They find a way to win that one. They are firmly in the mix in the Big 12 race with guys like Stephon Johnson making big plays, Tanner Koziel, and an offense that's going to be really, really hard to stop for this Houston Cougars team. Arizona gets a 23-17 win over Kansas State. I don't know what you say about Kansas State at this point. I don't know what happens to a team when they lose over there in Ireland, but just don't go over there. Whoever loses that TCU-UNC game, take their win total under and take it by a lot, because something happens. It's very, very tough for what Kansas State's doing right now. Another really tough showing. Arizona really needed this one. There's no doubt about that. It's not a conference win. I should say that off the top. This was a non-conference game for whatever, some odd reason. But they do go to Ames here after a bye week this upcoming weekend. Who knows? If they find a way to win that game against Iowa State, Noah Fafita is back on top of the world. This Arizona team is doing something pretty interesting. And Brent Brennan, after a year where I was pretty ready to write him off, if I'm being totally honest, he finds a way to revive this team and do something pretty special around there in Tucson. But I don't really know what is or isn't gettable for this Kansas State team going forward. Looking at their schedule, they can beat UCF, I suppose. Outside of that, I don't really know. Oklahoma State maybe is a gettable one, but it's not going to be pretty throughout the rest of the season. If I had to imagine for Kansas State, I don't think this one's going to turn out very well, is the way I'll put this. I don't know what happens with Avery Johnson after this year. I don't know what happens with a lot of that team after this year, but you might just want to ride this one out, Kansas State fans. Ohio State wins 37-9 over Ohio. This one looks a whole lot better than it was. For about 3 quarters, this one was ugly. It was 13-9 in the second half of this football game. And then Ohio State turns a corner and takes over the way that they often do. Jeremiah Smith makes a ridiculous play. You have Julian Sayin throw an absolute dime to Carnell Tate. Both of them went over 100 yards in this football game, and Ohio State's able to win comfortably. The main reason I want to talk about this game is Bo Jackson is a special player, and not the Bo Jackson that you're thinking of. He is a special player, but totally different conversation. Bo Jackson is a freshman running back for the Buckeyes. He went for 109 in this game, including a 64-yard run. That might be your RB1 going forward. That sounds crazy to me because I thought James Peoples was going to be a downright star for this football team, and he very well still could be. C.J. Donaldson, I thought was going to be the battering ram, quote-unquote, of this football team, and I tend to believe he's still going to be that. But at the end of the day, you have that kid rolling that quickly, he could be very, very dangerous. Obviously, this is not going to be the toughest challenge that they as a team or he faces, but that's a really special athlete that can do some really awesome things, and you never really know. For Ohio, the CFP chances were probably unlikely going into this game, and they're a little bit more unlikely now, but they could firmly be in the MAC race, and I think if you're talking to real college football people, you're going to be locked into the MAC on Tuesday nights, but we'll talk about that later in the season. For Ohio State, you got a sneaky trip to Seattle after the bye week this upcoming weekend. They should be okay before at Illinois, and then Penn State and Michigan to really watch from there. This football team's awesome in every sense of the word. Now, obviously, the offense left a little bit to be desired in this football game, but they're going to be fine. There's a sleepwalk spot that totally makes sense that I don't think is crazy. They get a bye week, they get to collect themselves, and then not a terribly tough one, but definitely a little bit of a challenge going on the road to Seattle and trying to beat a interesting Washington football team. Oregon gets a sleepwalky-ish, but a comfortable win, or 34-14 over Northwestern. They didn't look themselves through half of this football game. It totally makes sense. They've won 2 games where they've rolled and played really, really efficient football. You travel all the way to the Evanston, Chicago area, and you get a big-time win. It's fine. It wasn't perfect by any means, but outside of one explosive run for Northwestern, this football team for Oregon was downright dominant on the defensive side of the ball. They're going to be more than fine. They get Oregon State this upcoming weekend, and then it's at Penn State. For the whiteout at night, going to be downright special. You find a way to win that one, you could be setting up another trip to the Big Ten Championship, trying to win another one after all. So a lot of great things for this Oregon football team. I don't think they're going anywhere. I guess the best way to put it, they are going to be a team firmly in the mix all the way into November, and probably after that, we will see what this team can do. I was a little bit low on them coming into the season, but they're proving me wrong week by week. They're still looking at Indiana, USC, Washington, so definitely some really, really tough games, but they're essentially looking the CFP in the mouth if they find a way to win that Penn State game, and then they're probably looking the Big Ten in the mouth as well. Iowa State beats Arkansas State on the road 24-16. Please stop going to these group of 5 stadiums. You are going to lose one of these one time. And Iowa State probably should have lost this game. There was a bad holding call on a Jalen Raynor touchdown that took away one for Arkansas State that probably could have been a huge one in this football game. Iowa State found a way to win. And you sprint out of that stadium because it was a little bit sketchy late in that game, but you find a way to win, you move forward. They get a bye this week, which they desperately need, and then it's Arizona, Cincy, Colorado, and BYU. You should be in pretty good shape moving forward. You should be undefeated going into an Arizona State game, TCU, Kansas, that are going to be tough, but this team is firmly in the mix in the Big 12. They should continue to be the mix, but they got a lot of things to figure out, particularly the QB run game. If other teams are able to tap into that, particularly a team like BYU with Bear Brockmeyer or Sam Levitt finding a way to make things happen with his legs. Josh Hoover can do that. We know Jalen Daniels can do that. So something to watch throughout the season. Jalen Raynor was able to make a lot of plays with his legs in this game. Something to watch, but Iowa State gets the win. They move forward and firmly in the mix in the Big 12 going forward. USC gets a comfortable but not impressive win, 33-17. They needed a kick return to actually get to 33, so 26 scored by this offense. Not a very consistent group. I think they have the flash players to do some really special things and win some of these big games down the road, but they got a lot of things to figure out. Jaden Mayava has a lot of things to figure out. They got at Illinois coming up here pretty soon, Michigan, Notre Dame, and after 4 weeks, they get Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame over the next 4 weeks, and then they have Michigan State after that. After Michigan State next week. Apologies, broke that down a little bit weird, but at the end of the day, going to be a relatively tough schedule. If they find a way to go to beat Michigan State this weekend and then go 2-1 against Illinois, Michigan, Notre Dame, they're firmly in the mix. As of right now, I would not bet on them to go 2-1 in those football games, so it'll be interesting to watch what they can do. Everything's still on the table for this USC team, but not necessarily the performance they wanted to put on tape. Cal gets a win 27-14 over Minnesota. We got to talk about him. Jaren Kiave Sangapulatele. Hope I did that plenty well. He looks like Michael Penix. I don't know how else to describe him now. Maybe a little bit lazy with the lefty-lefty comparison there, but this guy slings the ball around the football field. He is downright special. This Cal football team looks dangerous. JKS went for 279 in this game, 3 scores. If this kid plays that level of football, they don't get Clemson. They don't get Miami, no Florida State, no Georgia Tech on the schedule. I don't know. I'm not saying they're going undefeated. I would probably not bet on them going undefeated or even really being in the ACC race. But this freshman quarterback is electric, and they have a lot of things going in their direction. We'll see how this kind of thing develops, but they got out South Dakota State this upcoming weekend. Then they got at Boston College. They find a way to win those 2 games, you never know. You can watch Cal the rest of the season, and maybe it's them and Georgia Tech in the ACC championship after they've run the table in the conference. I wouldn't necessarily bet on it, but it's very much on the table right now in the ACC. Deshaun Foster and Brent Pry have been let go. They were the first casualties of this football season. It was tough. Both these seasons for these teams, and really the last couple of seasons for these football teams, have been really, really tough. UCLA gets truly dominated by New Mexico. Frankly, 35-10 isn't even indicative of the performance that UCLA put on tape. They lose on Friday night, and I think the decision was probably made Friday night. And then Old Dominion just rolled over Virginia Tech. They were up 31-0 in that football game, and Brent Pry is let go. Virginia Tech turns to Philip Montgomery the rest of the way, their offensive coordinator. Tim Skipper, the special assistant to Deshaun Foster, is going to take over for UCLA. Both are going to be looking for new guys. The interesting wrinkle here in the world that we live in college football, the portal just opened for both these football teams. They opened today. It's going to stay open for an entire month. They won't be able to play this season, so you're not going to see anyone that played for Virginia Tech in Week 1 find their way to a new team and play for Ohio State in Week 10. That's not going to happen. That can't happen this year. But these teams might struggle to put together a team on the football field. Now, I don't think it'll be terrible, but there's a lot of players that are going to look at this and say, I've played 3 games. If I play if I play 2 more, I don't get this year back. I can use a red shirt as of right now, the ones that can use a red shirt. I can use it. I can move to a new team, start to learn that system, and be ready to roll in 2026. A lot of guys are going to make that decision, and I don't necessarily fully disagree with that decision. It's a frustrating one. It's one that I wish they didn't have to make in a lot of respects, but a lot of guys are going to do that, and we'll have to see what happens with these 2 football teams moving forward. I'm not sure UCLA is going to win a football game. I'm not sure Virginia Tech's going to win a football game. I'm not sure they're going to have a lot of football players to put out there on Saturdays going forward. Hopefully it's enough to put together a football team. Hopefully it's enough to at least be relatively competitive moving forward. Hopefully they keep the quarterbacks, I think, is the biggest thing here. Kyron Drones over there at Virginia Tech. Nico Imaliava, one of the more interesting characters in college football right now. We will see what happens in both those cases, but it's going to be weird times as of right now. In the next little bit, you had to make these decisions. I don't think it's a crazy decision on either side. So not necessarily wild, not necessarily what I didn't expect, but a lot of things are going to change about these football teams over the next little bit, and these interim coaches are going to have to find a way to figure it out. It's going to be a really weird time for UCLA. There's a number of guys you can go get. I think this UCLA job has untapped potential. I think it has the ability to be maybe not a top 10 or top 15 job, but be a pretty good one. Be in a position where you are in the center of a very, very talent-rich area. You're obviously competing with USC. That is going to be hard to do no matter what you do. But you have the ability to do this. You have donors that I think didn't get involved because they knew this thing wasn't going to go well with Foster, and it didn't go well with Chip Kelly before that. I think they're going to find a new AD, if I'm being totally honest. I think they're going to find a new coach, and I don't know who you go after exactly. I think there's a number of great options, whether you want to go up to Eugene and try to steal Will Stein. Maybe you go over to Utah, try to steal Jason Beck from them. It'll be really interesting to see how that develops. I do think UCLA is a job that you get the right guy in there with the right backing in, probably the right AD over him. You're in a position where you can do some really special things in LA. Obviously, you got quite a bit of work to do and your work cut out for you, but a lot of good things can happen over there. Virginia Tech's kind of interesting to me because in the past, they have been a high-level football program. I'm not sure that's going to be their future. I think they're in a bad position for the NIL era moving forward. Doesn't mean they can't do something really cool. And maybe you can go steal Shane Beamer. I don't think you're going to win that battle against South Carolina, but maybe he wants to coach where his dad coached for so long. There's a number of great choices around there as well. Bob Chesney, maybe from JMU, steal him over to come over to Virginia Tech, stay in the state. A lot of things on the table for these 2 football programs. The reality is you can have conversations. Probably nothing's going to be made official until the end of the year, and we'll have to see how all of that develops. But 2 coaches that, mainly Deshaun Foster, I should say, I don't think was going to succeed almost no matter what, given the situation over there at UCLA. For Brent Pry, a lot more stuff that was left on the table for him, so not necessarily a surprise in either of these cases. Really tough starts of the year for both these teams, and I don't think it's going to get a whole lot easier. I think a lot of guys are going to hit the portal. I think a lot of new things are going to happen with those programs, and probably going to be pretty tough for them to turn this thing around this year. So a lot of things that happened this last weekend, and 2 coaches that find their way out the door, and we'll see what happens with those programs moving forward. But we'll break down everything at the very end of the show. We got winners, losers, a number of things to talk about. Elite coaching won the weekend, and we'll talk about it all right after this, so stick with us. Welcome back, everyone. We just kind of found a word on this last weekend. We got Deshaun Foster and Brent Pry being let go. A couple other games that we wanted to talk about. A number of teams that just kind of sleptwalked through this weekend. Iowa State avoids a disastrous loss to Arkansas State. But now we got to get into the winners and losers from this past weekend. A number of things to talk about in terms of the winners and losers. And we'll get into some specific teams here in a second. But elite coaching won the weekend. When you talk about the three football games that really defined this weekend, you had Georgia Tech Clemson in the early slate, you had Georgia Tennessee in the middle, and then you had obviously A&M Notre Dame to finish it out. Brent Key's ability and comfort doing the fire drill at the very end of the game, that field goal to win it, was downright special. And it's something that a coach doesn't do well unless he's an elite coach and unless his team fully trusts him. They do over there in Atlanta. There's no two ways about that. That is I tweeted it out. That's one of the top 10 coaches in the entire country. No promises that he's going to do downright special things the rest of the year, but this guy has his teams ready in big time moments, and they play their best football against some of these big time teams. Elite coach that did elite things on Saturday. Kirby Smart maybe coached the best game in a while, if I'm being totally honest, in Knoxville. Had to handle the offensive line being all over the place in a number of different ways. Had to make defensive adjustments against an offense that's an absolute nightmare to deal with, and did an incredible job doing that. And you had a quarterback coming in there making his very first start. You let it rip. You told Mike Bobo to absolutely let it rip in this football game, and he did, and Gunnar Stockton did. It was downright special to watch, and it absolutely won them that football game. Texas A&M. Mike Oko didn't do anything downright special. They put themselves in a great position to win that football game, and Marcus Freeman, nothing necessarily against that decision, but maybe a punter being your holder would be a good idea going forward. But at the end of the day, coaching is going to win football games this year. It is absolutely a year where you don't have a dominant team. You don't even have a dominant player like you had with Cam Ward a year ago. So you're in a position where execution, where the quote-unquote boring stuff is going to win a lot of football games, where you have to have elite coaching, you have to make adjustments at halftime, you have to find a way to rotate guys in and out with the long season that you're going to deal with, and you got to find a way to put your quarterbacks in winning situations. That's exactly what these three head coaches did. That's exactly what a lot of coaches did, even on the other side of these football games, but they had to find a way to get a little bit better coaching in those football games, and Brent Key did it. Kirby Smart did it, and Mike Elko did it during this game, and a lot of other teams that just found their way through a little bit tough moments with some great coaching this past weekend. So I think coaching is going to be the defining feature of this season. It always is in college football, but this year maybe more than most. The loser is any SEC clarity you wanted to have. I don't know what's going to happen with this conference. It is all over the place. I think it's fair to say Georgia is the number one team moving forward, but A&M, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Bama, all looking very, very good right now. LSU is the number 2 team in the conference. It's razor thin between them and the rest of the field. They are not necessarily playing elite football on the offensive side of the ball now. I would pretty comfortably put them at 2, but I would have A&M or Tennessee right behind them, Bama, Oklahoma. These teams are really, really interesting. And then you have a Texas team that has not put it together yet. If they put it together, they absolutely are going to be a dangerous team, especially offensively if they put it together, because that defense is going to play at a championship level. Vandy looks very dangerous this year. Mississippi State looks like a dangerous team. This conference is going to get really weird. There's going to be a 9-3 team in the CFP, probably from the SEC, whether it's Texas or Oklahoma or Bama or Georgia, I don't know. It's going to be a weird conference, and I don't think there's going to be a clear cookie-cutter order unless maybe Georgia rolls through their schedule, which I'm not necessarily betting on them to do. So a lot of different things that are going to happen this year in the SEC. I felt not super confident picking that back in early August. I'd probably feel just as unconfident picking it right now. So it's a very weird conference that I think is going to get plenty weirder. The winner is the Miami Hurricanes. They look like the one team in the country that has played truly clean football through three games. Even a team like Ohio State did not play clean football on Saturday until the very last quarter, so they got a lot of things to figure out. This team is just rolling through teams. They look very straightforward. They're running the ball very efficiently. Carson Beck is not making the mistakes he did a year ago, and they do have the big win over Notre Dame and another ranked win over South Florida. Carson Beck looks like him again, which is really the big-time thing, probably because the offensive line is downright incredible for Miami. where Georgia last year just wasn't all that great at times. So the running back group is special, led by Mark Fletcher. The wide receiver core continues to prove themselves week after week. Still have some concerns in big games, but throughout their schedule, I think they're going to be more than fine with the group that they have. That Florida State game is going to be awesome to watch between those two teams, but it's going to be awesome to see what they can do going forward. Obviously, we talked about it earlier. It's Florida bye week, FSU bye week, Louisville. You win those 3 games, you are firmly in the mix to go undefeated, to be the number 1 team in the country going into the CFP. Obviously, quite a bit of work to do, and Mario Cristobal's got to earn that. There's no doubt about that, but I think they're in really good shape. They got to find, even if they lose one of those games, whether it's FSU or Louisville or Florida, I think they're okay. They just got to find a way to walk a little bit of a tightrope the rest of the way. As of right now, they'd probably be my number 1 team in the country. They look clean as can be and are running this thing incredibly efficiently. QB talent was a loser this past weekend. There were a lot of quarterbacks that coming into the season, I would have told you, and just about everyone would have told you, they were the best quarterbacks in the country. Arch Manning, I think I had at 10 coming into the season. Didn't want to give him too much, but the ability was very, very clear coming into the season. It hasn't showed up. There's no two ways about that. I don't know what to make of it. We'll see how that develops, but a very weird time over there in Austin. DJ Lagway, 5 picks this past weekend. Does not look the part. Did not practice a ton this offseason and really throughout last year, so not all that surprising, but he doesn't even look like the way he looked last year. So a lot of things to figure out there. Cade Klubnik did not look very great against Tech, obviously, and Garrett Nussmeier not necessarily rolling right now. Less worried about him than the rest of these guys because of who he is and how experienced he is, but at the end of the day, still not necessarily to the level that he wants to play. To me, it'll work itself out. I do think there will be elite quarterbacks that do kind of come to fruition. I think Drew Aller will play higher level football. I think Garrett Nussmeier will. I think a couple of these other guys, maybe Arch Manning will find it. Very questionable there, but we'll see what happens. The Heisman race is wide open, I guess is the best way to put it. There is not a quarterback that has taken downright control of this thing, and this time last year, I think you could have said Cam Ward is in very, very good shape moving forward, as is a guy like Ashton Genty, as is a guy like Travis Hunter. But at the end of the day, any quarterback could win it as of right now. Arch Manning could turn a corner and win the Heisman Trophy. I don't think he's going to do that. I want to make that very, very clear. But at the end of the day, the way it's open right now and the number of quarterbacks that are not playing elite football week to week, everything's still on the table for the Heisman Trophy this year. The winner is the Tulane Green Wave. Tulane gets a big-time win over Duke, and they saw South Florida lose their footing just a little bit. It is something that they absolutely needed if they wanted to be on even footing with them moving forward. I don't know if it's outright even footing, but it's relatively close. They go to Ole Miss this upcoming weekend. That would be the one. If they find a way to win that football game, they would be in great shape moving forward, and it would be very, very interesting to see what happened. Now, every time we talk about Tulane and USF and really the Group of 5 conversation as a whole, they could play in the American title. So it could just come down to one game at the very end of this thing, regardless of what happens the rest of the way. Obviously, they have to win the American games, but at the end of the day, these two teams could just be playing for a CFP spot, and if so, that'd be downright special to watch. Losers, top 25 teams with quote-unquote layups this past weekend. Texas, Ohio State, Iowa State, Penn State, and a number of others. Utah did not look the part this past weekend. They looked a little bit shaky at times. Now, teams like Texas and maybe Penn State to a certain degree haven't really looked good this year. So a lot of things to figure out there. Utah, Iowa State, Ohio State, they've looked the part earlier. I'm not super worried about those football teams moving forward now. Ohio State's win over Texas doesn't look as good as it did a little bit ago, but we'll see how that develops. It'll be really interesting to see what happens later in the season. I think we all understand at this point, this happens. There's going to be moments where these teams sleepwalk through a game or they don't exactly look the part, they don't exactly look confident, but they'll find their way through. There's always going to be elite teams at the end of the year. Maybe not like Georgia good or Alabama good, but absolutely going to be elite teams and find a way to get into the CFP and give us great matchups going forward. Overall, not super worried about those football teams. Fairly worried about Texas. I think would be the team that I would circle there, but this happens all the time. It's just not a great week for these elite teams that had quite a bit of a spread coming into this weekend. The winner is the ACC Challengers, and to be more specific, Louisville, Georgia Tech, and Cal, because the ACC got a little bit cleaned up this past weekend. Georgia Tech's win over Clemson obviously does help that. You kind of, I don't want to say knock Clemson out of the race, but put them in a really bad spot moving forward. You have Pitt really struggle and lose. You had Duke struggle and lose. You had Virginia Tech get absolutely rolled. You had SMU struggle with Missouri State. So you have an ACC that's absolutely wide open. Obviously, you would start with Miami and Florida State at the very top, but who knows? Maybe Cal and Georgia Tech can make something interesting here. Maybe Louisville can put it all together with Miller Moss and be able to turn a corner. And there's a world where we have Cal and Georgia Tech playing in Charlotte at the end of the year. I wouldn't bet on it, but it could happen, and a lot of things open for the ACC this past weekend. And then finally, the loser is the AP poll. This thing stinks in a number of different ways. I really hope the CFP doesn't take anything from this because it is rough. Texas is way too high in my opinion. I don't know why they're number 8 in the country. They should probably be around number 18 or 16 if I'm being totally honest. USC, why are they in there over Mississippi State and South Florida? I don't understand that. I get South Florida lost this past weekend. They probably should have been higher going into the weekend, so they didn't get unranked, but terrible. Notre Dame shouldn't be ranked. I get that's a good football team. I think they're going to be more than fine. I think they'll probably go 9-3 or 10-2. That's not a top 25 football team right now. They're not playing good defense. The offense is good, but at moments does miss the mark. I don't think that's a team that should be in the top 25. I get the argument for them to be in the top 25, but you're 0-2. You lost 2 games, one of which is at home. They should not be in that thing. I'm going to start with my rankings next week. I tend to believe it should start after week 4, so that's how I'm going to look at it. After week 4 in, we'll break down all of the stuff that I think in the top 25 right now. It's not going to look like the AP poll. I can tell you that pretty confidently right now. There are a number of things that I disagree with very vehemently, including maybe the number 1 team. But we'll break it all down next week, and I will give you my top 25 team top 25 poll moving forward in the season. We will do that every single week, but we'll start at the end of next week. Incredible weekend. A special weekend with a number of special games. We had 3 big games going into this weekend, and they all delivered. But thank you so much for listening. That's another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. Please do like, subscribe, comment. It means the absolute world to me. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I will catch you guys next time.